What if I told you that one battle changed the entire history of Westeros forever? Picture this. A young prince lies dead in a river, his rubies scattered across the water like drops of blood. The man who killed him would become king, but he never wanted the throne in the first place. This is the story of Robert's rebellion and the Battle of the Trident in 283 AC. A war that started with love, ended with betrayal, and set the stage for everything we saw in Game of Thrones. Today, we're going deep into one of the most important events in Westeros history. We'll explore how a tournament changed everything, why the Mad King lost his mind, and how Robert Baratheon's warhammer crushed more than just Rhaegar Targaryen's chest. So grab your favorite drink and settle in, because this is going to be a wild ride through the Seven Kingdoms. Let's start at the beginning, because Robert's rebellion didn't just happen overnight. The seeds of this war were planted years before anyone swung a sword. Our story begins in 281 AC, at the tournament of Harrenhal. This wasn't just any tournament. It was the biggest celebration the Seven Kingdoms had seen in decades. Lords and ladies from every corner of Westeros came to watch knights compete for glory. But here's where things get interesting. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, the crown prince and heir to the Iron Throne, was expected to crown his wife, Ilia Martell, as the Queen of Love and Beauty. That's just what you did when you won the tournament. You gave the crown of blue winter roses to your wife, or someone you wanted to honor. But Rhaegar didn't do that. Instead, he rode past his own wife and placed the crown in the lap of Lyanna Stark. Yes, that Lyanna Stark, Ned's sister and Robert Baratheon's betrothed. The entire crowd went silent. You could probably hear a pin drop in that massive hall. This wasn't just a political mistake. It was a public humiliation of House Martell and a direct insult to Robert Baratheon. But the real drama was just beginning. Sometime after the tournament, Lyanna Stark disappeared. The official story was that Prince Rhaegar had kidnapped her. He supposedly took her to the Tower of Joy in Dorne against her will. Now, we know from the show that this might not be the whole truth. But at the time, everyone believed Rhaegar had stolen Robert's bride. Robert was furious, but he wasn't the only one. Lyanna's father, Lord Rickard Stark, and her brother Brandon were absolutely livid. Brandon was so angry that he rode straight to King's Landing. He stood outside the Red Keep and shouted for Rhaegar to come out and die. That was a huge mistake. King Aerys II, also known as the Mad King, had Brandon arrested for treason. Then he sent word to Lord Rickard Stark to come to King's Landing to answer for his son's crimes. This is where the story gets really dark. When Rickard arrived, the Mad King accused both father and son of treason. He decided they would face trial by combat. But here's the twisted part. He chose fire as his champion. Lord Rickard was suspended over a fire in his armor, while Brandon was put in a strangulation device just out of reach of a sword. The more Brandon struggled to save his father, the tighter the device became around his neck. Both men died horribly, while the Mad King watched and laughed. But Aerys wasn't done yet. He sent messages to Jon Arryn, who was like a father to both Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon. The king demanded that Jon hand over both young men to be executed. That was the final straw. Jon Arryn raised his banners in rebellion instead. This was the moment Robert's rebellion truly began. Robert had lost his betrothed, Ned had lost his father and brother, and Jon Arryn was being asked to betray his foster sons. The three of them formed the core of the rebellion against the Iron Throne, but they needed more allies if they wanted to win. Robert quickly married Catelyn Tully. Well, actually Ned married her, but that's another story. The point is, they brought House Tully into the rebellion through marriage. They also had the support of House Arryn through Jon, and House Stark through Ned. House Baratheon followed Robert, of course, but the Targaryens had their own allies. House Tyrell from the Reach stayed loyal to the crown. So did House Martell, which makes sense since Ilia Martell was married to Rhaegar. And then there was House Lannister. Tywin Lannister played the waiting game. He sat in Casterly Rock and watched to see which way the wind would blow. The early battles of the rebellion were mixed. Robert won some, lost others. At the Battle of Ashford, Robert's forces were defeated by Lord Randyll Tarly. Yes, that's Sam Tarly's father, and he was considered one of the best military commanders in West. Robert was wounded in the battle and had to retreat, but he wasn't ready to give up. The rebels regrouped and continued their campaign. Meanwhile, Rhaegar was nowhere to be found. He had disappeared with Lyanna and left his father to deal with the rebellion. This was a huge problem for the Targaryens. Rhaegar was popular with the people and respected by the lords. If he had been leading the royal forces from the beginning, things might have gone very differently. But the Mad King was getting more paranoid by the day. He started seeing enemies everywhere. He had people burned alive on suspicion of treason. He even planned to burn down all of King's Landing with wildfire, rather than let Robert take the city. This is where Jaime Lannister comes into the story. As a member of the Kingsguard, Jaime was sworn to protect the king. But he was also watching Aerys' plan to kill hundreds of thousands of innocent people. We'll come back to that later. By 283 AC, the rebellion had been going on for about 2 years. Robert was gathering his forces for what everyone knew would be the decisive battle. Finally, Rhaegar emerged from wherever he had been hiding. He took command of the royal army and marched north to face Robert. The two armies met at a place called the Trident. It's a large river in the Riverlands, and it got its name because it splits into 3 branches. This was going to be the battle that decided everything. Robert had about 35,000 men with him. Rhaegar had roughly the same number. The battle began at dawn on what would become known as one of the bloodiest days in Westeros history. Thousands of men fought and died on both sides of the river. But everyone knew the real battle was between 2 men, Robert Baratheon and Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. When they finally met in single combat, the entire battlefield seemed to stop and watch. Robert was wielding his famous warhammer. This wasn't just any weapon. It was so heavy that most men couldn't even lift it. But Robert was massive, probably the strongest man in the 7 kingdoms at the time. Rhaegar had his sword and was wearing elaborate armor decorated with rubies. The 2 men fought in the middle of the river while their armies watched. Robert was fighting for his stolen love, his dead friends, and his right to the throne. Rhaegar was fighting for his family, his crown, and his life. The battle didn't last long. Robert's warhammer caught Rhaegar in the chest and caved in his armor. The prince fell into the river, and his rubies scattered in the water like drops of blood. The royal army saw their prince die and began to break. Some fled immediately. Others fought on until they were overwhelmed. But the Battle of the Trident was over, and Robert had won. However, the war wasn't finished yet. King's Landing still held out, and the Mad King was still on the Iron Throne. This is where Tywin Lannister finally made his move. He had been sitting out most of the war, but now he saw which way things were going. Tywin marched his army to King's Landing and claimed he was there to defend the city for the king. The Mad King's advisors told him not to trust Tywin, but Aerys was desperate. He opened the gates and let the Lannister army into the city. Big mistake. As soon as they were inside, the Lannisters began sacking King's Landing. They killed anyone who might be a threat to Robert's rule. This included Rhaegar's wife Ilya Martell and their 2 young children. Gregor the Mountain Clegane personally murdered them on Tywin's orders. Meanwhile, the Mad King was still planning to burn down the entire city. He kept shouting "burn them all" to his pyromancers, but Jaime Lannister had heard enough. He stabbed the Mad King in the back, earning himself the nickname Kingslayer. Then he hunted down the pyromancers and killed them too, preventing the destruction of King's Landing. When Robert finally arrived at the capital, the war was essentially over. The Mad King was dead, Rhaegar was dead, and most of the royal family had been wiped out. But Robert wasn't happy about how things had ended. He was particularly angry about the murder of Rhaegar's children. Tywin had thought he was doing Robert a favor by eliminating potential threats, but Robert saw it as the murder of innocent children. This created tension between Robert and Tywin that would last for years. There was still one more piece of business to handle. Ned Stark took a small group of his most trusted men and rode south to the Tower of Joy. He was looking for his sister Lyanna. What he found there would remain a secret for decades. 3 members of the Kingsguard were still protecting the tower, even though their king and prince were dead. Ned and his men had to fight them to get inside. Only Ned and Howland Reed survived the battle. Inside the tower, Ned found Lyanna dying in a bed of blood. She made him promise something before she died, but we didn't learn what that promise was until many years later. We now know she had given birth to Rhaegar's son, Jon Snow, but at the time, everyone believed Jon was Ned's bastard. Ned kept that secret to protect Jon from Robert, who would have killed any remaining Targaryen. With Lyanna's death, Robert's rebellion was truly over. Robert was crowned king of the 7 kingdoms. He married Cersei Lannister to cement his alliance with House Lannister, even though he never stopped loving Lyanna. Ned became Warden of the North and returned to Winterfell with baby Jon. Jon Arryn became Hand of the King, but the consequences of Robert's rebellion would echo through the generations. The destruction of House Targaryen left Daenerys and Viserys as exiles across the Narrow Sea. The murder of Ilya Martell and her children turned House Martell against the new regime. House Tyrell had backed the losing side and never fully trusted the new king, and the lies that were told to protect Jon Snow would eventually tear the realm apart again. Robert won his rebellion, but he never got what he really wanted. Lyanna was dead, and no amount of wine or women could fill that hole in his heart. The man who never wanted to be king spent the rest of his life trying to forget why he had fought for the crown in the first place. The Battle of the Trident changed everything. It ended 3 centuries of Targaryen rule. It put a new dynasty on the Iron Throne, and it set up all the conflicts we would see in Game of Thrones. Because in the end, Robert's rebellion wasn't really about politics or power. It was about love, loss, and the terrible price of both. So there you have it, the complete story of Robert's rebellion and the Battle of the Trident. A war that started with a crown of blue roses and ended with rubies scattered in a river. The rebellion that changed the course of Westeros history and set the stage for everything that came after. What do you think about Robert's actions during the rebellion? Was he right to start a war over Lyanna, or should he have tried to find a peaceful solution? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Game of Thrones history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content about the world of Ice and Fire. And if there's another event from Westeros history you'd like me to cover, drop a suggestion in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Remember, when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.